Welcome to the latest series of Broadcasting Today. Today we have Asad Ahmad from BBC London, a presenter with the station for over a decade. All part of our mission here at Middlesex University London to teach students how to think, but more importantly, how to do. Welcome to Series 5 of Broadcasting Today, and I'm delighted to say, hot foot from BBC One News just an hour ago comes Asad Ahmad, a former colleague, and today I'm on the set with Patricia Solczynska, who is a third-year undergraduate. First time in the seat. How's it feel so far?
It feels great.
Good, excellent. So,
thank you.
Welcome to Leighton College. You've come to be part of our audience today. Asad, let me start off with a really simple question. You left school hoping to make a fortune and went off to become a foreign exchange dealer. Then you made a diversion to the House of Lords as a researcher before going on to study law. Why did you take that initial trajectory?
You know, when I look back at it, I think, God, I just couldn't make up my mind. But I think it was a good path into journalism because it gave me an insight into completely different areas of life. And whatever I stumbled across, I tried to do the best of my ability, and it gave me a really broad outlook. So when I finally got to journalism, I thought, oh, I can use a little bit of everything I've learned so far and use it all in this great job.
Did it also, sorry Patricia, but did it also give you a feeling that when you learn what you don't like, you can be a bit more motivated with what you might like?
Oh, absolutely. I remember waking up at ridiculous hours of the morning on a Saturday to work in a supermarket a few miles away, and you work, you do what you have to do. That's what you do. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it. And it's all, when I look back, it's all part of the learning process. I don't regret it. I don't wish I hadn't done it. It all helped to make me into the person I have become. It all helped me to make the decisions I ended up making later.
So why did you decide to go then into the journalism?
It kind of came out of the blue. I was watching TV after I'd graduated in law, and watching TV, I was watching the report from Texas. It was after the events in Waco. I thought, God, what a job, look at what this is. I don't know what made me think that, but I just thought, look what this guy's doing. He's reporting such a fascinating story, doing it so well. What kind of a job's that? And then the next day I went back to my university, which I'd actually just left, went to the careers library. I thought, let me have a look at this journalism thing. I didn't know anybody in journalism. I didn't know any reporter. I didn't know anyone to talk to. So I went to the careers library, found out what I could, and I thought, oh, this looks quite interesting. Imagine getting paid to report on stories which are just fascinating. And that's where the interest just sparked, I suppose.
And you did the training in the BBC, right?
I did the training on the BBC's trainee scheme. That was partly because, being a former student and I'd just left, I didn't have the money to go on and do a postgrad in journalism, pay the fees, which was a good few £1,000s even then. And one of the few places that allowed people with my background who perhaps didn't have the financial means to learn journalism was the BBC trainee scheme. Very, very competitive. But I thought, well, give it a go. Don't really have an option. I can't afford to do this. And I did it. And I actually didn't get on. I didn't get on the first time, but it motivated me enough. I got close, but not close enough. It motivated me enough to think, right, next time I'm going to try even harder and do it. And thankfully, the next time I did.
One of the beauties of doing a trainee scheme, of course, is that you get to learn a little bit about everything, not just being a reporter, but being a producer and all the rest of it. I don't know about you, Asad, but when I joined the BBC, there was a huge amount of pressure on me to become a reporter real quick because I didn't have many brown faces on TV. Was that the same for you, or was it just something that instinctively you wanted to do to be on camera? Because I resisted it for about 6 years before eventually I went, OK, I'll do it if you really want me to.
And lucky for us, you did do it, so that was all good. But I suppose there wasn't that pressure to become a reporter. Like you say, the good thing about trainee scheme, you do a little bit of everything, producing, even a bit of editing on the screens, which in those days very few journalists knew how to do. And I really valued that. I didn't plan on becoming a presenter. It wasn't, for me, I have to be quite honest, it wasn't about getting my face on screen. but it was about just being involved with the stories. So as long as I was involved with the stories, whether it was in producing or reporting, I would have been quite happy. But just the way things happened, I suppose, the way the cards fell, opportunities came my way to report. I was given chances. I took whatever chance came my way. I was happy to do anything in a newsroom. Even if it was to empty the bins, I would have done it, and I would have done it with a smile on my face. But the opportunities came, I took my chances, and then things just started to snowball from there.
I'm not sure about emptying the bins, but I wouldn't like that. But my first story was about the Wombles. Can you remember your first story? Do you remember the Wombles?
I do remember the
Uncle
Wombles.
Bulgaria was patting my head with my piece to camera. Caused maximum hilarity in the newsroom.
I'm sure that video still exists somewhere as well.
Yeah, probably.
All right, that's one for me to look out for. Okay. My first story, and again, stumbled across it. I'd never done TV in my life. There was a lot of sickness in the newsroom the day I was there, and I was meant to be shadowing a reporter to learn a bit about how television reporters work. Because of the sickness, a news story came in. The producer scratched her head and said, "We have nobody to go out and do the story. Asad, can you go out and do the story?" And I was like, I know nothing about this. Is the first day that I've even been in a television newsroom. And it was about a teacher who'd been thrown out of a school for coming out with some extreme messages towards students in Birmingham. And it was an inner city school in Birmingham. And so I went out there just on a wing and a prayer, really, to report on this story. It wasn't the easiest story to report on because, like I say, it was in a city school which was in the spotlight. They didn't want to be in the spotlight. So when you turn up at the school outside with a camera, children don't want you there, let's say. So it wasn't the easiest, but it was a baptism by fire. One, again, with hindsight, I welcome at the time, was difficult. But sometimes, as you know, Kurt, with the greatest challenges come the greatest learning experiences.
The Muslim Council of Britain recently announced that they will be introducing their own strategy as the Prevent seems to be failing. So do you think the Muslim community is affected by the terrorist attacks, and the Muslim youngster can feel isolated from the community because of that, what is happening around the world?
I don't think there's any question that young Muslims of any age, are affected by the atrocious, terrible attacks going on around the world, simply because, not because they have a connection with the attacks, it's just because they share the name of the faith. Now, I say share the name of the faith because I do not believe they share the faith. What these extremists, violent terrorists believe to be their faith is not my faith. It is not the faith of Muslims around the world. And Muslims around the world find it insulting, find it heartbreaking that these violent people committing these atrocious acts say they're doing it in the name of the religion which other people identify with in the most peaceful, beautiful way. In the same way, the Ku Klux Klan, claiming to be a Christian organisation, swearing to Christian morality when you join the Ku Klux Klan, do not in any way represent the Christian church and the Christian beliefs of good Christians all around the world. In the same way, these extremists claiming to be Muslims do not share the faith of the Muslims who we meet day to day in this country and all around the world. However, because of that sharing of the name and because it's prevalent in the media, in the newspapers, on TV and radio, that label is being bandied about that, oh, they are Muslims, oh, they're fighting for Islam, they call themselves Islamic State. And that offends a lot of people, that upsets a lot of people, and obviously they're feeling a connection that they don't want because they're saying, well, the rest of the world is seeing us as with a connection, so we can't ignore it. But it's heartbreaking for them. It's heartbreaking for the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world, just for the sake of these handful of Muslim extremists who really rubbish the name of what is a beautiful faith, like all the Abrahamic faiths and many other faiths besides.
It's very difficult, isn't it, Asad? I mean, we're trained, aren't we, as BBC reporters, presenters, to be impartial, and it's part of it becomes part of your DNA. You find it very difficult, actually, to take positions. But when something like this happens, in the same way as I've often reported in minority communities, you feel actually there's something extra you need to say. And I know you've done a lot of charitable work beyond the BBC to try and ensure that that articulate voice comes across, that articulated voice of from within those communities comes across. And I've often found it difficult to ensure that I was impartial. How do you manage that challenge to make sure that you can have a voice on something as passionate you're passionate about, but at the same time retain your impartial presence on TV?
I think it's because when I talk about the issue which you brought up, Patricia, it's because I think I can honestly say I don't feel strongly about it because I am of the Muslim faith, my heritage is of the Muslim faith. I feel strongly about it as a human being. Whether we're talking, if we were talking about Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism, I'd feel just as strongly if I felt a disservice was being done to that faith by others. And so if I'm talking about the Muslim faith and covering stories as you know we need to, I try and, I have my identity as a Muslim, of course I do, and I don't forget that, but I try and look at it as a human being. And if you look at the world through the eyes of just your human being, as a human being, you know what, most of the time you'll be impartial. You won't take sides because human nature is a wonderful thing, and it usually guides you along a middle path where you see all as equal and everything as equal. And I try and see the faith of Islam in the same way, like I say, that I would other faiths, regardless of what they were.
Well, we live in an uncertain world, don't we? And the reality is, it's a very complex place, and one of the things as a reporter that you discover very quickly, it is way, way more complex than you ever thought it was. That doesn't mean it's unfathomable or unreportable. It just means you have to stand back and say, goodness gracious me, I wasn't quite sure that I understood what was going on there until I actually got in the mix of it. Perhaps that's part of it.
Yeah, maybe. The wonderful thing about the job we do is that it opens your eyes up to so much more. It's your job to find out what's going on. It's your job to find out what's between the headlines and all the rest of it. And so you do become educated in areas, not always correctly. Sometimes it's somebody else's opinion you're listening to, but then you'll hear the other side of the coin as well. But yeah, it's that thing of you learn to dig a bit deeper, but that's part of your job, which is a good thing. And so you end up, getting into muddy waters, which become very, very complicated. But it's a good thing. I see it as a real bonus of the profession that we do, to be able to have an insight, an idea of the complications which lie behind the headlines that perhaps other people don't have the chance to read between.
Coming back to your charity work, can you explain maybe what is your role in Mosaic?
In Mosaic, I was involved with setting up Mosaic with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. He had an idea that he wanted to help initially it was disadvantaged young Muslims around the country, and to help them not go down the path of extremism and show them that there's another path where we can tap into their talents and they can be of value to the communities around them. And so he had this idea. A few of us went round, we discussed some of the thoughts and the intentions and aims behind it, and then we came up with an idea of perhaps using Muslims who have done well in their professions to help mentor. It's a simple message of just mentoring young people in inner cities who perhaps haven't had somebody who's done well in their lives to say, look, you can do it as well. You've got talent. This is all you need to do. This is the paths you go down. And then we came up with the name Mosaic, and then it quickly snowballed and it spread around the country, and it spread so well, and such good things we're doing. And I think in the true essence of Muslims, because although it was initially started to help disadvantaged young Muslims, no, hang on a second, if this is helping Muslims, why can't it help anyone who's from a disadvantaged background? And I think that's exactly right. Charity shouldn't be for one faith or one type of person. Charity is for anyone who needs it, and I think that was exactly the right road to go down. So
do you think this is the point of networking, to find a person who will guide you, the person who will support you?
I think it's always important to have a mentor, and if you can get a mentor through networking, through meeting other people, it's a fantastic thing. I remember when I started at the BBC, I don't know where it came from, but I had a sixth sense to try and get to know the people who are the most experienced. So some of the most elderly people in the newsrooms that I started off in, and now I'm one of them, so people hunt me out. But when I started, I was doing that simply because I thought, well, if these people have been doing the job for 20, 30 years, they must know things that will help prevent me from making the mistakes that perhaps they learned from and then got better at. And
Did
they
you
can.
have a mentor?
I didn't have a formal mentor.
No, but an
I
informal
had informal mentors, people who, right from day one in Birmingham, then in Scotland and other places I've worked, more experienced senior journalists who I felt I could go to. And you know what? They were so generous with their time, their experience, their words. And I believe it saved me years of, if I didn't do that, it saved me years of making mistakes for myself to get to the point where I got to much quicker, simply through the helpful words of these other people. And Kurt, I'm sure you found, I know people have done it to you, people with experience, we don't mind helping younger people. It's actually quite flattering in a way.
Maurice Stewart was my first mentor, actually. First day,
Maurice Stewart?
Maurice Stewart.
Yeah.
First day in the newsroom, that story about Uncle Bulgaria,
Yeah.
which caused maximum hilarity,
Yeah.
and she was really worried that I might think that people were laughing at me when the whole newsroom was laughing. And so she came round and put her arm around me and says, don't worry, Kurt, they're not laughing at you. It just is a very amusing piece that you've done, which is great because you've shared some joy with people.
Yeah.
So she kind of lifted me up and she kept an eye on me.
She's a wonderful woman.
Ever since.
In fact, I've got a Maurice Stewart story. Because when I was a child at school, the only non-white face that we could see on the mainstream BBC News was Moira Stewart. And Moira Stewart is a brilliant professional. So we took great pride in seeing her because she was clearly there on merit. But to see a black woman doing the job so well, and I still think she's one of the best out there. And then fast forward about 20 years, and I was in Scotland, and I remember coming home, and my mother was visiting me that day, and the light on my answering phone was flashing, and I hit play, and Moira Stewart had actually left a message on my answer machine about changing some shifts while we were on breakfast news. She didn't have to say who she was. It's Moira Stewart. The voice you can recognise anyway. My mum's jaw hit the ground. She couldn't believe. Oh, that's Moira Stewart. She's left a message on your answer machine, and it was great to see her face. But because it meant something to us. Moira means something to us. We grew up with this wonderful broadcaster.
I mean, you first made a name for yourself, didn't you, in Scotland, in many ways? I mean, what was a boy from East London doing in Scotland?
Right, I'll correct you on the East London bit. It's South East London because we're very funny about these things in South East London. Yeah, I know it's close, but
that's you South London people. I bet you got your passport inside.
Oh, look at that! Look at that! Look. Yeah, it was a long journey, and sometimes even now, even today, Kurt, I sometimes sit there in the studio, and I think, how did I get here? How did I get to be so lucky and fortunate to be doing the job, working with the people I work with, interviewing, speaking to the people I get to speak to. When there was me growing up in South East London, in a city, but thankfully, I've been very fortunate. I've had good people around me. I've had good support around me, good advice around me, and the chances have come my way. And it's been a strange journey, but like I say to my children, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Is it true that you can take the man out of South East London, but you can't take South East London out of the man?
That's so true. It's so true. I can't tell you.
You still spend a lot of time up in Scotland, don't you, on the Isle of Skye? I know you're always dotting off to the Isle of Skye. Where's Asad? Oh, he's on the Isle of Skye. He's having a relax up there. What's that all about?
Well,
is that your safe haven, as it were?
It's my secret hideaway, which isn't so much of a secret anymore. But yeah, the Isle of Skye, the beautiful Isle of Skye, where I've got family. That's where we retreat to, and it's just. I love London. I'm a born and raised Londoner, and I love the city. But sometimes it's good to leave the city, take a deep breath, think about what's going on in London, but from an outside location. That's why the Isle of Skye, Scotland, generally where I worked, is such a tonic.
Does it give you a sort of different perspective when you're up there, when you're looking back? It's a bit like the Black Hills of Coolin, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the Isle of Skye, you can be up the top and you can see the world in a completely different way.
I think it does. It helps to clear your head. It helps you to think about things more clearly. And when it comes to the news, sometimes, and I'm sure you find, Kurt, when you're working in the news, it's one news story after another, and you can start to look at things very much like that. The next bit of copy coming in, the next thing happening, and everything you look at like that. Sometimes it does you no harm to take a step back and look at everything and put everything into context and in some sort of perspective, and that's what having that break certainly does.
What are you the most proud of in the work of for BBC you've done? What is like your...
God, that's a good question. What am I most proud of? That's a tough question. It's not because I'm proud of so many things. It's because, let me answer that in a slightly different way.
I mean, I know you got the award for a presenter, right? For the presenting from
reporting.
Pakistan. For reporting, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate, but you know what, with all those things, and even like the Royal Television Society Award, although it would be easy for me to say that's what I'm most proud of, it would be a little bit of a lie if I said that, not because I don't appreciate it, but because I find it very humbling. The position I find myself in, like I was saying, you know, in the whether it's in the studio every day, and sometimes, yeah, I do walk into the building, I think, goodness me, I never thought I'd be walking into this building one day. I find it all very humbling. So I kind of think if I had a feeling of pride, it'd be that, well, look what I've done. Whereas I don't really see what I've done as in that way as because of the way I am. No, I see it very much through the eyes of, well, no, it's thanks to other people, my family, my parents, my friends, my colleagues. They've got me here. So anything I achieve belongs to them. It doesn't belong to me. So therefore, my personal pride, I do my job as best as I can. That's my aim every day. Do the job as best as you can. I will try and put as much effort into one short morning breakfast bulletin, which goes out every half hour, as I do into a 6:30 half-hour programme, which we do in the evening, where a lot of resources go into it. I'll try and do the same because I feel humbled with the opportunity to even be on the TV, and I owe it to the people who have got me there, all those around me, even the many people who won't know they've got me there. I owe it to them to say thank you. That's my way of saying thank you by doing the best I can.
Were you one of the first journalists to interview someone from MI5 or MI6? First ever?
It was MI6, yeah.
MI6?
Yeah.
That's a pretty tricky-dicky moment, wasn't it?
It was an interesting one. Surprisingly, just really nice guys, so ordinary. You'd walk past them in the street, but then I suppose they stood out. Yeah, they wouldn't be very good at... No, exactly. But yeah, it was interesting. And that they were actually talking about trying to make inroads into the Muslim community, not to spy on them, but to get help from them so that they can, you know, work together as far as counter-terrorism goes. And just a really interesting bunch of guys. I got to meet some agents, some young agents as well. Again, really interesting, just the kind of people you'd stand next to on the train station, never know what they did. And again, one of the privileges of the job is you get an insight into these areas, which otherwise I would never have had a look at.
Good moment, though.
Yeah, it was a good moment.
Proud moment.
Well, like I say, it was there for the likes of you, for the likes of many other people who helped me to get there. And that's honestly how I see it. I'm not trying to sound humble. That's honestly how I see it, genuinely.
What advice would you give to young people who would think about corresponding overseas?
What I would say is that the thing with journalism, it's not the easiest profession, as Kurt knows, to get into. You have to be resilient, you have to keep trying, you have to be able to take rejection and then move on. Make yourself stronger with that rejection and move on. And that's probably a good thing. That prepares you well for the profession, because whether you're working on a news story in London, anywhere else in the country, abroad, you're always coming across obstacles. You always come across, nothing's ever, you know, you think, oh, this is a straightforward story to do. I'm going to go out there, I'll do this story, it'll be ready with plenty of time to spare. That very rarely happens, doesn't it, Kurt? There's always something unexpected around the corner, particularly when you're working abroad. And that's when those qualities which you needed to start off in the profession will really come home, and you'll think, my goodness, I thought that was tough getting in the profession, but now I'm using what I learnt and what I picked up along the way, and I'm using it in the job. Now that I finally got here, I'm still using it, but I'm using it to get a better result with the story I'm working on and all those things. So I think it's that thing of resilience. Don't be put off from the start, because those difficulties you may face, you may not face it, but the difficulties you may face getting into journalism are just difficulties of a different kind you'll face in journalism, but then when you're in the profession, you'll call those difficulties challenges. And it's a wonderful part of our job. It makes the job challenging, and once you overcome those challenges, it gives you a great feeling of, yeah, I did it, and I've managed to serve the public, the viewing public, the listening public, the readers, in the best way possible because I managed to overcome this challenge.
How about this public, when you sit in the studio like every day, every night, 6 o'clock, and you know that 1,000 people are watching you right now? Are you still conscious about these people, or you just forgot about it?
In my personal case, I just don't think about it. The camera is just like another person in a room. It'd be like, you know, if we replaced yourself with a camera, no disrespect, much nicer looking than a camera, but it would be like me looking at a camera. So I treat the camera as if I'm looking into someone's eyes, and as if it's just me and that person talking. Because I think when viewers are at home, they want to engage with the news reader. They don't want to feel as if they're one of a million people watching. They want to feel as if like you're the only, you know, that person is the only person you're speaking to. And one of the nicest compliments I was given actually was last year when a producer from another part of the BBC was with us for a couple of weeks, and she said, "Can I tell you something?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "You know, when you read the news," she said, "sometimes I find myself answering you. So if you were telling us about a story or telling me about a story, I'd say, 'Yeah, I know that. No, is that right?' And she said, I end up, and she said, and then I correct myself, and I think, 'But you can't hear me.' And I took that as a real compliment because at least she felt that I was talking to her, and that's got to be my aim. The aim is to serve the public by trying to make people feel that I'm speaking to them, because ultimately I am. I'm speaking to every individual. It's not.
It could be a compliment, or could just be plain weird.
It could be weird, yeah. Maybe
Listen,
it wasn't.
Seriously, you talked about you never know when life can turn corners, and you're never quite sure how it might work out, and qualities of resilience, and it won't have escaped people's notice that you came with a walking cane. Obviously, you're very dapper, and back in the 20s, people would wear a walking cane, but yours is for another reason, because you had a very serious accident when I was working alongside you, and it took you nearly 18 months to recover from that very serious head injuries. And I was always amazed that you came back and presented, because it was such a serious, and it was so touch and go. Let's not beat around the bush here. You know, I remember you speaking to your wife, and she wasn't sure whether you were going to make it. Fortunately, you did make it. And you worked your way back onto screen. And for most people, they'd have no idea that there was a before and after, and that you went through that 18 months and got yourself recovered, and you were resilient enough to present again in a live context. Most people would have given up.
Yeah, it was a difficult time, and you like you say, you know it well, Kurt. There was nothing to say I would even survive the accident. That was touch and go. And then would I ever even be able to work anywhere? And then the fact that I managed to come back to work, that was a wonderful thing. And again, coming back to your earlier question, Patricia, that's also why I feel humbled, because I don't feel I'm owed this job. I feel this is an opportunity which has been gifted to me for whatever reason it may be, and it's up to me to make the most of it. But I feel humbled to be given that opportunity, and also after the accident, to be able to be given a second bite at the cherry, and it's maybe even more humble about doing the job.
Now,
I find it harder because of the serious head injury and the brain injury which I have. Everything requires that much more effort. So instead of going in and reading the news and giving it 60% effort in order to appear everything is calm, I'm literally having to give it 90-95%. So it's more exhausting. It's more humbling. Do I enjoy it more? Yeah, I probably do. I think through that experience of appreciating it more and starting to learn to appreciate it again, like I did when I first was given the chance, except that feeling has remained with me, even 7-8 years on now. That feeling has remained with me, that to appreciate it.
It was a second chance, really.
It very much a second chance, very much.
And how do you think about social media? I couldn't find any of your profiles, like you don't have Twitter, right? You don't have Facebook.
I don't.
That's quite, I would say, strange for a reporter, presenter. I mean, you can find everyone nowadays on Twitter. Why is that? Are you just old-fashioned, or?
As you can tell, I am old-fashioned. Yes, no. It is incredibly important. It's only becoming more important, and in the media as well, it's becoming hugely important. We're relying so much on social media now to get the news, to give the news, to get new audiences when it comes to news. Couldn't be more important. My personal reason for not having Twitter and Facebook is because I know the kind of person I am, and I know that if I started something like that, you know, I'd be on my my phone all the time. I'd be tweeting, I'd be reading tweets and all the rest of it. And in order to control myself from completely losing myself in my phone, and to help me keep my work-life balance where it is, that's why I've decided not to get into social media yet. That may change, but I keep across it. At work we have BBC London Twitter pages, Facebook page, so there is access to it. So it's not completely there, it doesn't feature in my life at all, and I couldn't be more aware of the importance of it. It's superbly important.
Do you think it is still worth to studying journalism at university? Do you think it will attract more citizen journalism?
As in social media attract more citizen journalists, do you mean?
I mean like general.
Yeah, I mean, again with social media, Facebook, Twitter, citizen journalism has become bigger, and again it's an asset to news. It's not a rival to news. It doesn't undermine news. It gives us instant access to what is going on. Pictures in television, obviously everything is about pictures. This morning unfortunately there was a fatal stabbing in South London. We managed to get pictures without any camera crew being available to us. It would have taken us easily an hour and a half to get to the scene. We managed to get pictures within minutes because somebody got out their phone, filmed some pictures, sent them to us, said yes, you can use them. They were on the screen within 15 minutes of them.
So what I'm asking, is it still worth studying journalism?
I think it is, because although that's the social media side, getting pictures, getting the stories out there, telling stories very quickly, as far as journalism is concerned, there are skills to learn in journalism. There is an art to telling stories, to having a sense of what makes a news story. How do you analyse stories, do the interviews, put pieces together, best convey the story to your public. These are skills which, yeah, some people are good at doing on their phone, but actually for most of the time, if you want to do it day in, day out and do it to a very high degree and high level.
Is there still time for this quality? Is there still time and money for the quality, for making like worthy pieces? If there is like thousands of information, of pictures coming from social media, from citizen journalism.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and different people have different views on that. My own opinion on that is that I believe there's always an audience for quality journalism. If you make quality television, if you write quality articles, if you make quality radio, there will always be an audience for that. I do not know of an audience anywhere in the world which will see something of quality, which gives them news of quality, and they'll switch over because, no, they want to see something else. I mean, on a recent trip, I was in Pakistan actually just a few months ago on a visit there, and as I was going through customs, somebody stopped me. An elderly gentleman, all in his uniform, his gun was there and all the rest of it. And I thought, oh no, he's going to give me a hard time. I had nothing to hide, but it's just that delay that you have. And he was just about to asked me to open up my suitcase and all that, which I would have happily have done. But he said, so what's your name? I told him. What's your profession? I said, a journalist. Who for? The BBC. And there I was in the middle of Pakistan, in quite a rural place in Pakistan. It's 54 degrees heat outside. And as soon as I said I work for the BBC, he said, his face just changed. He said, you know what? He said, I grew up listening to the BBC World Service. He said, it's a wonderful organisation. He said, it's quality news. He said, that's who I go to for my news. Off you go. And that's it. He couldn't be nicer. But again, it was that thing that he engaged with, a service which he equates to with quality journalism. And there he is in Pakistan, but he won't go to the local media that was available to him. He went to the media that was the broadcasts that were coming out of London, 5,000 miles away. And that's what he connected to. And I think there's always a market for quality journalism, which means we need quality journalists.
So you preempted my last question, actually, because I was going to ask you about the digital transformation, which you resist on the one hand through social media, but nevertheless you remain very, very optimistic. Talking about optimism, we've got some students here, and I want them to ask some questions, because I gave a talk before this, before they heard from you, and I was pretty upbeat, pretty optimistic, saying, actually there's an awful lot of opportunity out there, much more opportunity for getting access than when we started, and they've got to make the most of that. Any questions then? Right at the back, I knew you were going to have a question.
What has been your most challenging, not necessarily news story to report on, but what's been like the biggest challenge so far in terms of the job that you do?
Okay, that's a very easy one for me to answer, and that was the Lee Rigby murder in Woolwich. The reason why it was such a challenge was that it was so local to me. It was a stone's throw from where I've grown up. I knew people who were there and witnessed it. I knew people who had connections with the killers. I know people with connections to the barracks, which is, for local people, it's such a lovely place and something, you know, all locals welcome. And so therefore to go there and report on such a horrific, horrendous, nasty, cruel attack, but yet be there in a place you know so well, that's as good as home. That's like me being on the streets there, I feel completely at home. I know people walking past me, I know them. I went to school with them, I know their parents, I know their children. And so that presented lots of challenges, but that was emotional challenges, because there I was reporting on something, and you know, objectively as I can, but yet at the same time.
How do you do it objectively? I mean, how do you remain that kind of like? How do you stay professional like that? I mean, is it just a job?
Yeah, you do have to see it in a job, but that was the first time, I think, where the emotions of reporting on that story really started to not get the better of me, but I really felt it. Suddenly putting on that professional mask, which we do when we do a job, that's what you have to do, and you do your job. And the emotions just tend to go until maybe once you finish broadcasting, then there's room for the emotions. But that was one time where the emotions were fighting at the same time as a professionalism. But what I tried to do was use that to my advantage. How and why? By trying to give an insight to people watching who've just trying to get across what's going on, but try and give them an insight to the area, to the people of the area, to the barracks, to the different connections to what had happened, but using my knowledge and insight just by being a local lad who grew up there, and trying to help that story along. So I tried to use it to a positive, but as far as personal difficulty is concerned, clearly that was the one. Yeah.
You've travelled across the world and done many different stories all over the world. Where would you say is the most challenging you've been and reported from?
The most challenging, my immediate answer to that was going to be the earthquake hit region of Pakistan when I went there, because the geography of it was so difficult, because obviously the place had been flattened, and to see homes wrecked and people's lives just ruined was very difficult, and just getting there was difficult. But actually, when I think about it, it was probably going to Darfur, the Darfur region of Sudan. That was difficult because people living in refugee camps, facing horrific incidents which led them there to be there at the hands of the Janjaweed, who are driving them out of their homes and their villages. And I remember being there once in one of the villages, speaking to a woman who had agreed to speak to us. I mean, when you're in a situation like that, you never put pressure on somebody to speak to you, but saying that at the same time, there are people who want to speak to you because they want to get their story out. That's what she wanted to do. Speaking to her, she sat in this tent. And while I was interviewing her about what had happened and how she found herself there, a man on horseback with guns and 2 layers of bullets across his chest came behind and just stopped, and he started watching. This woman said she had been raped while she was talking to me. And then while I was there, the fixer who was with me went and spoke to this man to try and just sort of calm him down, just to make sure he wasn't going to cause trouble. And while he did that, the woman said, "That was the man that raped me." And she stopped, and I looked at her and I said, "Listen, please, let's just stop. Let's just, you know." "No," she said. She stopped me from ending the interview. She said, "No, I want him to know that I'm getting this story out there." And the determination, the spirit, the courage of this woman was something that I just couldn't believe. I'm not somebody to say no to somebody like that. I mean, who am I to say no? If she wanted, I certainly wasn't going to put pressure on her to speak more than she wanted to. But I thought, right, you take control. You tell me whatever you want to tell me, and that's it. She did. We ended the interview, and then I went over and spoke to the man on horseback with the guns, and we managed to calm him down and chat to him, as you do in these situations, as best you can. And so hopefully, I can't say categorically, hopefully she was fine. I've thought about her often. I hope to God she was fine. But then, you know, that thing of the people you meet in these extreme situations who, yeah, your heart goes out to, but you know what? There are things you can learn from them. There is courage that honestly leaves you astounded. This is a side of human nature which day to day in this country, honestly, we don't see. And it's a privilege to see, it's an honour to see, and it'd be wrong to forget it, it'd be wrong not to try and learn from it.
One here and one here. Let's go for your comment.
Has there ever been a day where you really wanted to get the story out, get a story out, but your producer wouldn't let you, or you wouldn't get a chance to?
No, but the reverse has happened, where I have got a story and I have decided not to put it out. And this has happened a few times, several times, because for me, I'm one of those old-fashioned journalists, as Kurt will be as well, and that's no disrespect to your wonderful experience of journalism. Yeah, less of the old. Where, for me, as much as I love my job, as much as I feel it, all I do is serve people, so I'm a servant to people to try and, when I do stories, it still comes second to trust. If I can't honour the trust of somebody who tells me something, my job is worth nothing. Trust comes first. And there are times that I've been told things by people, confidentially or whatever, and I've thought, this will be the story of the year. Once or twice, off the top of my head, I can think of things where I thought, if that gets out, that's the story of the year. That's one of the biggest stories this country will have this year. But it's been told to me in absolute confidence, either as a friend, as somebody they know, as for whatever. And I can't betray that trust, because if I betray that trust, I've lost my integrity. I've lost something in me. And it's about cutting your nose off to spite your face. You know, next time when the word gets around that, you know, so-and-so, you know, he said he wouldn't tell anyone, then he did, no one's going to speak to you. And the one thing that I've really enjoyed, and how the MI6 interview, which you mentioned earlier, came about, was simply because word got around, no, we can trust him. If we say something to him and we say, look, that's off the record, you don't tell anyone else. And I know a lot of journalists would abide by that, but it was that thing that I'd established enough of a reputation where when it came to talking to someone, they said, right, we'll speak to you. And it was that level of trust.
With the proliferation of social media generated content and embedded citizen journalism, how do you protect the integrity of news, especially in a cost-cutting environment?
That's a tough question. I think they're certainly, speaking for the BBC, we have to trust the people who are now editors in things like social media, which we didn't even have a few years ago. And they're there to try and uphold a certain standard. They seem to be doing a good job. They try and do a best as job as they can. But what they do is, like at the BBC, we have producer guidelines of rules and regulations we have to abide by, which go above and beyond the rule of British law. So we have our own standards which go far beyond that. On social media, we have to stand by those rules. Sometimes you have to let that amazing story go because you can't stand by the rules and the
less scrupulous news gathering organisations.
That's entirely up to them. I mean, generally, I'm not trying to sidestep the question. Less scrupulous organisations, it's up to them. I have not worked for the BBC. Is the only organisation in the media that I've worked for, and something I'm very proud of. I love the producer guidelines because they do maintain a certain standard. And even as we go into these new areas of social media, of Twitter, of Facebook, those same standards must apply. And I think that's only good for the BBC.
It's fair to say that it presents everyone with a massive challenge, social media, does it not? Because it's very difficult in this world of noise for people sometimes to even trust the mainstream outlets. And so the challenge is to take that information and present it in a way through the mainstream outlets which give people some context. And the reality is there isn't a lot of context. Anyone can be a social media star, anyone can be a social media commentator, and there are plenty of them. And we've not even got to artificial intelligence yet, and what artificial intelligence can do with social media. Although Facebook and Google and the like are using artificial intelligence increasingly to try and regulate some of that. We could have that conversation for another 2 weeks probably, and still probably not get a good answer to that particular question. But I want to thank you, Asad, because I know you've given us more than the 95% you give to the news. You've given us 100% today, and we really appreciate it here at Middlesex. I know the students from Leighton really appreciate it. It's been a great day having you here. Thank you very much for coming.
Great pleasure.
Thank
Kurt,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.